The story of World War II truly begins in the aftermath of the First World War, when the Treaty of Versailles brought Germany to its knees. An entire nation was crushed under humiliation, poverty, unemployment, and political chaos. Out of this darkness emerged one man, Adolf Hitler. He tapped into the pain, anger, and frustration of the German people, convincing them that Germany would rise again. He transformed the emotions of a broken nation into fuel for his own agenda, gradually securing complete control. Hitler's first mission was to rebuild Germany's military strength, something strictly forbidden by the treaty. Then he annexed Austria, seized the Sudetenland, and when the world failed to stop him, he grew bolder. On September 1, 1939, Germany invaded Poland, and this single event ignited World War II. Germany's blitzkrieg strategy stunned Europe, lightning-fast attacks, flawless coordination, and overwhelming firepower. Nations fell one after another, unable to resist this new style of warfare. Germany swept through Norway, Denmark, Belgium, and the Netherlands in mere weeks. France, once considered Europe's strongest military power, collapsed in just 6 weeks. Britain now stood alone, the last major force resisting Hitler. But Britain refused to surrender. In the Battle of Britain, the Royal Air Force fought with unmatched courage, sacrificing everything to halt Germany's advance. This battle became a turning point, proving that freedom would not be taken so easily. As the war intensified, Germany turned east and launched a massive invasion against the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa was the largest military assault in history. After early success, the Germans reached the outskirts of Moscow, but the brutal winter, stretched supply lines, and fierce Soviet resistance slowly shattered Hitler's momentum. The Eastern Front became a graveyard for millions of soldiers, marking one of the deadliest mistakes in German strategy. Meanwhile, across the Pacific, Japan was expanding aggressively. On December 7, 1941, the attack on Pearl Harbor shocked the world and forced the United States into the war. With America's entry, the balance of power shifted dramatically. The Allied forces began to push back across Europe and the Pacific. Battles like Stalingrad and El Alamein in 1942 and 1943 turned the tide, proving that the Axis powers were no longer unstoppable. In 1944, the Allies launched the D-Day invasion, landing on the beaches of Normandy. The soldiers who stormed those shores laid the foundation for Europe's liberation. Germany was collapsing from both sides, Allied forces pushing from the west and the Soviets advancing from the east. By 1945, the war had reached Berlin. Hitler retreated into his bunker, and as defeat became inevitable, he took his own life. Within days, Germany surrendered, ending the war in Europe. But the conflict continued in the Pacific. Japan still refused to give up. The United States made a grim and unprecedented decision, dropping atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. These devastating attacks forced Japan to surrender, bringing World War II to its final end. The war left behind unimaginable destruction, loss, and trauma, but it also reshaped the world, creating a new global order and a renewed desire for lasting peace. As the guns finally fell silent in 1945, the world stood in the shadow of the most devastating conflict in human history. Entire cities had been reduced to ashes, millions were displaced, and families across continents struggled to rebuild shattered lives. Europe, once a center of culture and civilization, now resembled a broken landscape, its people exhausted, hungry, and searching for hope after years of destruction. In Germany, the Allied powers took control and began dismantling the remnants of the Nazi regime. The Nuremberg trials became a defining moment of justice, where leading Nazi officials were held accountable for unimaginable crimes. For the first time in history, global powers came together to prosecute crimes against humanity, setting a legal precedent that continues to shape international law. These trials revealed the full horror of the Holocaust, exposing the systematic genocide of 6 million Jews and millions of others whom the Nazi regime considered undesirable. Across Europe and Asia, nations began the long process of recovery. The United States introduced the Marshall Plan, a massive economic aid program designed to rebuild war-torn Europe and prevent future instability. Factories rose from ruins, bridges were repaired, and economies slowly regained strength. In Japan, America oversaw major political reforms, transforming the once militaristic empire into a democratic nation focused on peace and economic growth. But even as the world rebuilt, a new tension emerged. The wartime alliance between the United States and the Soviet Union dissolved almost immediately after victory. Their competing ideologies, capitalism and communism, clashed, giving birth to the Cold War. Instead of bullets and bombs, it became a conflict of influence, espionage, and nuclear threats. The world divided into two major blocs, and for decades, nations lived under the fear of another global catastrophe. Meanwhile, former colonies in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East began fighting for their independence. The fall of European empires became one of the major outcomes of the post-war era. Nations like India, Indonesia, and many African states finally emerged as independent countries. The world map was changing rapidly, shaped by both hope and uncertainty. To prevent a tragedy like World War II from ever happening again, global leaders formed the United Nations in 1945. Its mission was simple yet ambitious: maintain peace, resolve conflicts, and protect human rights. Although not perfect, the UN became a symbol of humanity's desire to avoid another global war. Institutions like UNESCO, WHO, and UNICEF were created to support development, education, health, and humanitarian aid around the world. Economically, the war pushed technology and innovation forward at an unprecedented pace. Radar, jet engines, antibiotics, nuclear energy, and early computers emerged from wartime research, transforming everyday life in the decades that followed. The sacrifices of millions unknowingly paved the way for the modern world we live in today. Yet, the emotional scars of the war lingered. Survivors carried memories that could never be erased, memories of battles, bombings, loss, and trauma. Generations to come would hear their stories and learn the price of conflict. World War II became a warning for humanity, a reminder that unchecked hatred and ambition can swallow nations whole. In the end, the legacy of World War II is a complex tapestry of pain, resilience, destruction, and rebirth. It reshaped borders, toppled empires, created superpowers, and sparked movements for freedom and equality. The war changed not only countries but the very way humanity understood peace, conflict, and responsibility. And even today, more than 70 years later, the echoes of that global struggle continue to influence the decisions and direction of our world. In the years following World War II, the world hoped for lasting peace, but the uneasy alliance between the victorious powers collapsed almost instantly. The ideological divide between the United States and the Soviet Union widened with every passing month. What began as political disagreement soon transformed into a global confrontation, one that would come to define the second half of the 20th century. Germany became the first battleground of this new era, not with weapons, but with influence. The Allies divided the defeated nation into 4 zones of control: American, British, French, and Soviet. Berlin, the once shining capital, was also split in the same way. At first, the world believed